Welcome to a new Tank Encyclopedia voiced article on the Renault R35 in Lebanese service, written by Marissa Bellot. Before we begin, we would like to thank our patrons for their continued support of our website. The Renault R35 was born as a result of the French 1933 light infantry tank program, which set requirements for what would basically be a remake of the World War I-era Renault FT with more modern technology. The most common of the three tanks that were adopted following this program was the R35. A slow, two-crew light tank which featured a puny 37mm SA-18 main gun alongside a coaxial Mach 31 7.5mm in a fully rotating turret. While originally meant to be used as a support vehicle alongside the French infantry in a European war, the R35's large production run meant it saw service beyond the plains of northern Europe, including former French colonies which reached independence. This was the case of, for example, Lebanon. Lebanese independence. The current country of Lebanon fell under the authority of the French Republic following the victory of the Entente powers in the First World War. A former Ottoman territory, Lebanon, alongside its neighbor Syria, became a League of Nations mandate under French management following the 1920 Treaty of Sèvres. Both territories were generally joined together as the French Levant. Following the invasion of France in the spring of 1940, the French Levant remained loyal to the legal government of France, which became the Vichy regime. After German aircraft were allowed to transit through airfields in Lebanon to support Iraq in the Anglo-Iraqi War of May 1941, the Vichy colony was invaded by Commonwealth and Free French forces in June and July of that same year. Now in possession of these colonial territories, Free France made considerable concessions. Lebanon was granted independence on the 22nd of November 1943. However, this independence was still not in full effect. Most of Lebanon's troops, about 3,000 men, remained a part of the French army as the Troupes Spéciales du Levant, which were finally transferred to the Lebanese government on August 1, 1945. Formation of a Lebanese military. The new Lebanese army that was formed from 1945 onward was at first overwhelmingly equipped with whatever the French colonial troops had left in the Levantine country. The infantry used the MAS-36 rifles, and the country's first armored vehicles were Renault R35 and Hotchkiss H35 light tanks, as well as the Renault UE and Lorraine 37L armored tractors and supply vehicles. While Lebanon kept a moderate military budget which never reached over 4% of its GDP, it quickly acquired a variety of armored vehicles from other sources to replace those long obsolete French light tanks. As a result of the conclusion of the Second World War, vast quantities of military equipment were available at a cheap price. In 1949, Lebanon acquired 16 Sherman Fireflies from Italy and 56 Staghound armored cars, including some fitted with AEC Mark III or Crusader turrets, armed with a 75mm Ordnance QF and 6-pounder guns respectively. In the 1950s, the material used by the Lebanese army would only continue to diversify by including M41 Walker Bulldogs, AMX-13s, and Charioteers. The 2-pounders refit. Despite this quite considerable influx of modern armored vehicles, particularly for a small country with a moderate military budget such as Lebanon, the old French equipment was not immediately phased out. The R-35 light tanks were subject to a particularly interesting and considerable modification. Some R-35s, the exact number of conversions being unknown, had their 37mm SA-18 main gun removed and were refitted with a British QF 2-pounder anti-tank gun, which had a far more impressive anti-armor performance. As the coaxial Mach 31 machine gun was part of the gun system and was fitted in the R-35's APX-R turret, it was removed as well, but a photo seems to indicate a hole for a coaxial machine gun was included in the new mantlet. Whether the vehicles reused the Mach 31 machine guns or rearmed with another model is unknown. In comparison to the SA-18, the 2-pounder was a much larger gun. While similar in caliber, it was much longer and heavier. The R-35's gun was particularly small and light. The gun and its mount weighed only 110 kilograms, and the 37mm gun had a barrel length of 777mm. In comparison, the British QF 2-pounder Mark 11 had a barrel length of 2,080mm. The shell of the 2-pounders were also much longer, being 40 by 304mm in comparison to the 37 by 94mm of the SA-18 shells. Incorporating a larger gun required some significant modifications to the vehicle's turret. The gun mantlet area was quite obviously lengthened on the Lebanese 2-pounder conversion, having a very round shape, whereas the French one had a straight shape. The gun's barrel obviously extended much further than it did for the SA-18. Under the barrel, the recoil chamber also stuck out of the turret, which indicates that the 2-pounder used was a field gun, as the tank gun model used on British vehicles lacked this feature. Despite this, the breech of the gun most likely took far more internal space in the turret than the original 37mm gun, which would have made the vehicle even less ergonomically viable. Interestingly enough, the vision port on the left of the gun appears to have been filled with a fixed rounded cover on the Lebanese conversion. The reason why this modification was undertaken is unknown. When or where the R35s were converted, as well as how many received this larger gun, beyond that is more than 2 vehicles, is unknown. It should be noted that the same conversion was theoretically possible with the H35 light tanks, which Lebanon is known to have used. Those featured the exact same APX-R turret as the R35, and the conversion process would have been the same. Refitting the R35 with a 2-pounder gun vastly improved the anti-tank capability of the vehicle. The SA-18 was a gun known for its sluggish muzzle velocity and puny capabilities, penetrating just 18mm of armor at 35 degrees and 400 meters, with its model 1935 armored-piercing projectiles firing at 600 meters a second. In comparison, the 2-pounder's standard armor-piercing tracer shot could penetrate 37mm of armor at 60 degrees at 500 yards. However, while formidable against 1930s standards, these penetration values were still subpar by the late 1940s and early 1950s standards. In addition to this, the reduced internal space of the turret may have ended up reducing the R35's capacity even more. However, they could have had limited utility against the mishmash collection of armor of the neighboring countries. For example, Israel operated H-39 tanks that were not vulnerable to the 37mm SA-18, but definitely were to the 2-pounders, and even against vehicles that both guns could penetrate, such as lightly armored Marmon Harringtons or makeshift armored cars. The higher velocity of the 2-pounder gun made it a far more accurate weapon, particularly at intermediate and longer ranges. Lebanese service. Details about the R-35 light tanks in Lebanon's army are scarce. While Lebanon was theoretically involved in the Arab-Israeli War of 1948, its army barely engaged, and nothing suggests the R-35s were ever used in this conflict. Lebanon's neighbor and ally in this conflict, Syria, is known to have made use of R-35s, while Israel operated 10 illegally acquired Hotchkiss H-39 tanks. The use of the R-35 in the Lebanese military is known to have lasted until at least 1958. From July to October of this year, Lebanon faced a considerable political crisis, with clashes between the US-supported and Christian-aligned government forces, and a variety of Arab nationalists and socialists supported by the United Arab Republic, the Union of Syria and Egypt that existed from 1958 to 61. Particularly violent clashes happened in the city of Tripoli, north of the capital Beirut, where the Lebanese military made use of a variety of its armored vehicles against the insurgents. Photos show the use of staghounds, Sherman Fireflies, and charioteers. Alongside more modern vehicles, at least one Renault R35 was engaged. The photo sadly only shows the turret's rear, which prevents the gun from being identified, though the source does mention the vehicle was rearmed with a 2-pounder gun. The surviving example. While the R35 conversion was most likely applied on a limited number of vehicles only, at least one has survived to this day. The vehicle was recovered in Beirut, Lebanon's capital, and shipped to the Musée des Blindés du Saumur in France. When exactly this happened is not confirmed, but it may have occurred during the French intervention in Lebanon as part of the United Nations MNF peacekeeping mission from 1982 onwards. A photo from 1982 does show an R35 very similar to the one currently in existence, down to the missing commander cupola. The Saumur Tank Museum is known to sometimes receive vehicles recovered in French military interventions, such as an Iraqi T-55 that they possess. The vehicle, when recovered, had obviously been lying abandoned for a while, being covered in rust and with a large part of its interior missing. Nonetheless, it remained in a quite good state, though it was missing the rounded commander cupola. Restoration of this vehicle is being undertaken by the association France 1940 Véhicule, and a photo from 2017 shows the efforts to restore the vehicle have advanced quite considerably. As several Renault R35s already exist in their original state, the vehicle recovered in Lebanon will keep its unique modification. Conclusion. The last of the R35s. The R35 is generally viewed as a quite disappointing tank, plagued by horrendous ergonomics, anemic armament, and poor mobility. It proved to be a light infantry tank that was absolutely incapable in mobile warfare scenarios during the Battle of France. This, however, did not mean the vehicle's service ended completely in the spring of 1940. The large number of R35s produced, 1,540, the most produced French tank of the 1930s, meant that the type stuck around for several years longer, first in German second line and training units, but also in colonial service of the Vichy regime, then Free France, and then finally newly created local forces such as the Lebanese military. Nonetheless, one should not necessarily view the long service of the R35 in Lebanon, lasting at least well into the 1950s, as a testimony of the vehicle's rusticity and durability. While not the most unreliable French tank, it was a far from flawless design, with complaints already being raised against it in pre-1940 France. The use of the vehicle for decades in Lebanon stems more from a will not to let military hardware go to waste, even if it implies applying makeshift modifications to improve the capabilities, such as fitting a 2-pounder gun. The fact that some R35s were still fully operational in Lebanon as late as 1958 is a testimony to the quality of the mechanics and crews that kept the vehicles operational for more than a decade post-independence. That is all for this article. Please check back to our website, where we will be posting new articles on the regular. If you would like to support the work we do, please consider subscribing or donating through PayPal or Patreon. To keep up with the articles we post, you can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, and our community Discord channel. Until next time, keep us in your sights.